Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of Burn Your Boats. Have you ever wondered why someone with a high wealth can feel broke? Another name we've heard this used in the past is the broke millionaire, while another with seemingly much less might live more comfortably. Well, the answer lies in the surprising difference between income and wealth. Today, we'll explore this financial paradox. David is going to share some of his takeaways from discussions with many high net worth earners, and I'm going to share my own journey revealing how financial security goes well beyond just a paycheck. So get ready to unpack the complexities of income versus wealth, the power of investment strategies, and the emotional roller coaster that can impact your financial decisions. We'll also dive into the challenges faced by the seemingly wealthy and discover actionable steps to build true financial well-being. To all the entrepreneurs out there that feel broke all the time, I promise you are not alone. And for all the financially secure, high-income W-2 earners, you need to give this a listen to make sure that the secure financial feeling you have right now while listening to this podcast is not just a temporary sensation. So join us for this insightful exploration, because feeling secure and building lasting wealth are so within your reach. Let's get right to the show.
Welcome to the Burn Your Boats podcast, the paycheck paradox, why rich investors feel poor. And now, your hosts, Clark Lunt and David Shaw.
All right, Clark. It's podcast time again, Clark. I'm looking forward to today's topic.
Favorite day of the week, right, David?
Yeah, right. You know, I actually do like this podcasting thing. Yeah. It's nice to sit here and think about, all of these incredible conversations that we've had with people over the years, and reflect on our own experiences and share them.
Yeah.
It's not that we are, the biggest guys out there, talking about, making hundreds of millions of dollars. I hope that this podcast is relatable to the people who listen to it, and that they can walk away with a sense of having learned something. And today's topic, Clark, is just something I've heard over and over and over again, and I've experienced it myself. And so the topic we are going to discuss today, Clark, is understanding the inverse correlation between income and wealth. Think about that, the inverse correlation between income and wealth. So what the hell are we even talking about? What does this even mean?
It is kind of funny because, there's a concept of like the higher the income, obviously the more kind of wealthy you feel. Okay. And I'm going to put an emphasis on the word feel, right? Does that necessarily mean that you have the highest wealth? It does not. And then inversely, if as your wealth grows, your net wealth, sometimes you can actually feel it'll create less income for you. And because of that, you almost kind of feel broke, or you just feel like more poor than you did maybe than when you had that W-2 job with that super high income. And so we're going to kind of dive into that today, as to the mindset of why the heck would you be worth more money, yet you feel like you're broke, and in essence, David. So I think that's a great topic for us to talk about. And it's important because it's hard to bridge that gap from saying, okay, I'm making all this money, and then you actually maybe go into you create more net worth, which usually means you're putting more investments in and things like that, and you feel like you're broke, David. So talk to us a little bit about, I know you've had a million conversations with, different clients over the years. You've had your own experiences. Talk to us a little bit about this point as to what you've seen maybe from your own personal journey or discussions you've had with clients over the years.
Well, let me start out with an anecdote, I suppose. Remember when I was younger, living in New York, and I would consider myself a reasonably well-paid person at the time, and I knew some really, really high income folks, right? And it amazed me how, no matter how much income the people I knew made, they still lived paycheck to paycheck. And so I just thought that was amazing, that you might start off living on on a sofa bed, when you arrive in New York first, just after college, in your friend's house, and that might be out in Long Island, right? And then you get your first job, and maybe you move into a one bedroom out in the outskirts of Queens, right? But then you get your first pay increase, and before you know it, you're in the Lower East Side, living in a studio apartment, because that's a big upgrade
Right.
from being out in Queens, right?
Right.
And then you get you get a new job, you get another pay rise, you're moving over to Chelsea or Tribeca. It's all getting cool then. And then from there, I've seen a lot of people make the next step where, they get paid more, they do better in their career, and then they move up to the Upper West Side or Upper East Side. But it's amazed me over the years how these people that I've known would live paycheck to paycheck, even they made astronomical amounts of money, right? They had no wealth, right? But they felt wealthy.
Right.
And so that's always stuck with me. And then I subsequently have spent, the last 15 years or so on the telephone with the other cohort of high income earners, business owners, very well paid engineers, and a lot of people out in Silicon Valley and California particularly. And these people are extremely well paid also, but they have figured out that they're far from wealthy. And so they're not upgrading their lives, and they're not doing this. And then they actually call me almost in a panic. They might be 44, 43, 45. They've been high income for years, but now they realize they're not wealthy.
Yeah.
And so you take those two, the step from high income and blowing it all, or high income and knowing you're not wealthy. And then I've spoken to a lot of wealthy people who have equally called me freaking out. And what it is they have high net worth, but no income. And it's an absolutely perplexing thing, in that this journey from, willful abandon of spending all your money every week and thinking you're loaded because you got a new job or a pay rise, to getting paid very, very well and realizing you're not wealthy, to talking to people who might have exited a business. They might have sold their business for $10 million, or they might have exited a company with stock options that they've just liquidated, or liquidated part thereof, that don't throw off any income. But they might have thrown off, let's say, $5 million of net worth. And then, so now they have what anyone would reasonably expect to categorize as wealthy, but they're freaking out because they got no income. And so what this podcast, I think, Clark, is going to try and dig into is, what's that correlation? Where's the middle ground? How do we find it? And what do we do with it? So, Clark, what's your thoughts on kind of those three avatars that we're talking to here today?
So I kind of want to give a personal experience that I have, that I've kind of seen myself, just kind of on self-reflection. And I think a lot of people probably listening to this have probably already experienced it maybe, or they're right smack dab in the middle of it. So I'm 40 years old, okay? And I remember when I was out of college, probably my third or fourth year in out in the real world, we'll call it. So let's say I was 25. I was in a W-2 sales job, probably making anywhere from like $100,000 to $120,000 a year. Probably the best year was like 130, 140, right? And I remember that I got paid weekly, David, and the first check that I got each month, it paid my mortgage, it paid like my car payment, it paid basically all my bills in one. The next 3 checks were just like, went straight to my savings account, right? And I look back at that and I was like, I had zero money problems, like zero. I had no financial anxiety. I was kind of slowly buying a house like every other year. So I would just save up 20%. So I could save up the 20%, put it down, and still be able to have plenty of money if I wanted to go on a vacation or two. It wasn't a big deal, right? I wasn't worth anything. I was worth zero, right? But I had no anxiety. I was in my 20s. I had no, my expenses were low. And I look back, and then once I kind of transitioned into kind of this entrepreneurial kind of run your own business, and I have now constantly reinvesting back into things, whether it's a business, whether it's into real estate, whether it's into a new roof, whether it's into a CRM for our company to make us more efficient. And now I'm worth, so much more than I was then. I'm making more money than I was then, and I have so much more. We'll call it financial anxiety today than I did back when I was making less. I had less rentals to worry about, so I only had, let's say, I had 3 rentals. That's 3 ACs, 3 roofs, 3 tenants. It's not a tremendous amount to juggle, and it's ironic, right, that I make more money now. I have a lot more net worth, yet I have so much more financial anxiety than I did when my life was simple and I just got paid every week and I knew it and my bills were covered. And I think a lot of people listening to this, like, it'd be interesting to have your own self-reflection as to which bucket are you in? Are you in like the super safe bucket where you don't have much stress, you don't have much financial anxiety, but you don't really have a lot of net worth, right? You don't have a lot of other things working for you while you sleep. So it's ironic to kind of have self-awareness, to look back on that and figure out that, man, I have way more financial anxiety right now. However, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I could never go back, David, to a W-2, and basically work for someone where I feel like that my options are a lot less. So that story struck with me, and I'm glad that we're able to kind of do an episode like this on it, because I was super safe. I had no anxiety, I could do what I wanted, yet I don't want that. And I would never go back to that. So how do you feel about that, David? Does that strike it all home for you?
Well, you mentioned a lot of things there, and I think what it is, looking back at that time in your life, if I examine it, an outsider looking in, I think there's a lot of, just financial ignorance in there, in that you're 23, 24. You got your life in front of you. You got all the energy in the world, right? You're not thinking about retiring. You're not thinking about wanting to, stop. And I admire, young people in their 20s and 30s, and they start thinking long term. I really do admire them, because for the most part, people their age don't. People their age just, feel great. They drive down the road and they catch a reflection of themselves in a store window driving down and fill in the blank of their muscle car or whatnot. And, it makes them feel good, but they're just quite frankly ignorant of what their real financial situation is. And it's funny, I have here in real estate, and I have a lot of friends in and around me who are very transactional in what they do, and they're my age. They're in their, late 40s and early 50s, and they're still, they're driving around on Land Rovers or even higher end cars than that. They live quite, fantastical lifestyles. And yet when we kind of dig in the conversation with them, they often, tell me, I don't own any rentals, or I own one. And I'm like, what happens when the music stops in your world? What would you do then? And they're stuck, right? They're just like, well, I'll figure it out, or, and that is kind of really what we're talking about here today.
Yeah.
We're talking about, what is going on where, you have this lifestyle creep, when you're, driving around in Land Rovers. That's fine. I'm not against Land Rovers, but if you have the income and to cover that is, let's say, at least passive, to cover that. But if you have to show up for a job on Monday morning and you're blowing all your money on Land Rovers at expensive watches and vacations, and you have to show up for a job the following Monday, you're not wealthy at all. You might look wealthy and all that kind of stuff. And so we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but equally what's the nature of today's podcast is it's amazing to me when I talk to people, and I do some lending as a bolt-on business in what I do every day. And we lend to wealthy people who are very asset rich, but they're income poor. And so that's another side of things where they might own, let's say, I'll just make it simple. Let's say they own a $3 million home, and they need money for something. It could be for a car, it could be for a boat. I'm being facetious. It could be for a medical procedure. It could be just for lifestyle, or just life expenses. It could be for any of those things. And they might own lots of assets, but they don't really have very much income. And so when they do need money, let's say they go to a bank. So you might have all the assets in the world. You go to a bank and say, hey, listen, I want some income here. I want some money. They're like, okay, let us look at your assets. Like, okay, so you're very asset rich. That's great. So now show me, where the income is going to come to pay for this loan that I'm about to give you. And that's what strikes them across the face, is that they're like, hold on, I've got like $7 million of real estate here. And they're like, yes, you do. You've got $7 million of equity in these pieces of real estate, but they're all already underwritten by, first position mortgages or whatnot. And they're like, so we see that you have all this net worth. That's great. But if we give you a $750,000 loan, I don't see where the income is going to come to pay for that loan. And so they don't get that loan. And that's equally mind-blowing that we lend to people who have $10 million worth of equity in different assets, but they've got no income. It's really strange. And so that they've been even small loans from banks. And so if you kind of take that concept that, well-paid people, if they're smart, feel financially insecure, and asset-rich people feel financially insecure, where is the middle of the road? And how do we build our lifestyles around that? And so what are the investment strategies, Clark, for kind of wealth accumulation, right? While also so you're gaining and harnessing the compound effect of inflation, amortization, and you're compounding the just global growth through investments, and then you're compounding the power of time, right? So what are the investment strategies do you think that people need to be aware of, right? That give them the income security, but also the growth? Because the natural state of people that we meet, on one side, we have high earners who have experienced life creep, or we have high earners who are earning a lot of money, but they're afraid of investing, because investing, we're going to get into this a little bit later, investing is very emotional. And so they want to keep themselves liquid, right? So liquidity for a lot of people is way more important than future financial security, right? But there's a real cost to this liquidity.
I think the lifestyle creep, before we move on, is it's easy. It's not something that is something you set out to do, right? Per se. It's not like I'm going to go earn a bunch of money and then I'm just going to raise my lifestyle so that I'm no better off than I was. Let's say I was making 50 grand a year and I'm living a $50,000 a month or $50,000 a year lifestyle. Well, now I'm going to go make 100 and then live like I make 100, right? I don't think anyone actually says that, right? They just organically over time, they're like, I don't have to budget as much. I can go out and buy a slightly nicer car, and it's kind of the death of a thousand cuts, right? You start eating nicer dinners, you start eating out more, right? One of the things that I've always done, because I'm no different, right? If I just all of a sudden get $100,000 in my bank account, right, and it's just sitting in my personal checking, and I'm just speaking from experience, is that it's easy for me to just not watch what I spend quite as closely, right? If I'm out at the grocery store, I get like the more expensive stuff or the nicest steak at the nicest restaurant. And so my own personal guardrails that I put up is, if I make like a big check, right? Let's say we flipped a house and we paid ourselves a bunch of money or whatever it is. Let's say you have a big bonus, right? Is I immediately take that money, I take my expenses that I need for the next month out of it, and I get it the hell out of my own personal checking account. I can't see it. It's like, I know it's a simple concept, David, but out of sight, out of mind, right? So I only give myself enough money for my expenses in my personal checking, and I ship it the hell out of there into some other account, preferably another bank, so that I can't just like easily transfer it. So that's just something that I do because I understand it's just mental. And I know that money's still sitting there. Let's say I made $100,000 and I put 3,000 of it into my personal checking. I know it's there and I know I can go get it. But ultimately, if it's just a little bit, that's one or two steps harder to go pull that money out, I'm going to be more cognizant of saying, I don't actually have that money. My mindset says I don't have that money. It's like I'm tricking my brain into it, right? So I just wanted to kind of make that point because it's just personal to me that I do every time. Because I know that there's been times where I've left that money in my account and all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I'll pay for this and I'm doing this. Yeah, that's no big deal. Maybe I was going to do it or I was on the fence. Let's just go ahead and do it because it's just right there sitting in my account. What's the difference, David, between $97,328 and $94,526? It's nothing, right? So I think that we were talking a little bit about the different types of investments and liquidity, and this is such a big deal because everyone needs, and I hear this all the time, is that someone will say, "Look, I need a rainy day fund, David. 25,000, 100,000, 500,000, million, whatever that is. But what does that cost you, right? What is that rainy day fund of $200,000 just in case X happens, just in case Y happens? What is that actually costing you?" And we kind of dove into this before this episode and we kind of looked at the layers, right? Like, let's say you have $200,000 rainy day fund. Okay. For example, you've got, a savings account or a money market or something like that, where you have very quick access to it. It's very liquid. You can pull it out, the minute you get off the phone when you're talking to someone. Then you have like the next step, maybe you have like stocks, crypto, things like that, where it's a little bit more volatile in terms of the swings of it going up or going down. You have real estate, which becomes even less liquid, right? Because yes, you can always pull the ripcord out and sell a piece of real estate, but it requires you to talk with a realtor. It requires you to probably do some repairs. What if you have a tenant? Are you going to sell it with the tenant? Do you have to wait till the tenant leaves? It's much less liquid. Let's say you want to go borrow a home equity line against that property. Well, what if that home equity line is, in today's numbers, it's 8, 9, 10%, right? So it's very expensive. So even if you don't sell it, but you're pulling out your equity, essentially, now you're paying super high interest on it. And then all the way to like owning your own business, right? Is that you can't go out and buy a new training system for your employees, a better CRM. You're not able to go invest that money into that business and then go, I need 50 grand. I'm going to go to the bank and tell the bank I just spent 100 grand on this new CRM for my employees to make their lives easier and more efficient. And they're just going to give me 50 grand against that. Like, that's not how it works, right? So it becomes even less liquid. But guess what the theme is, or the trend is, that each bucket that I've just talked about, as you get less liquid, guess what is also happening? You have compounding, right? You have a business where you have employees that are getting better and you're able to compound their efforts to be able to grow revenue, right? Are you going in and growing every piece of that business, or your employees, right? So you're leveraging their efforts. Real estate, we talked about this in almost every episode in terms of the way that real estate's leveraged through tax benefits, through appreciation, through rent increase, through all the different things that you have. But as we get more liquid, David, there's less things that are compounding, all the way to a savings account where it's just sitting there earning you, 2, 3, 4%, whatever it is, depending on the climate. So it's something that $200,000 that I just gave as the example is that if it's sitting in a savings account, yes, it feels good. It's easy to get to. You can withdraw it at a moment's notice, but there's nothing else working behind the scenes to be able to provide a compounding effect. There's no other people working for that 200,000. There's no appreciation of the 200,000. It could go up or down. So there's no leverage in that, right? So that in itself is, you need to ask yourself when you're listening to this, is that my money that I have, whether it's sitting in a savings account, whether it's in real estate, whatever it's in, crypto, is it compounding right now, this minute? Is it, when I go to sleep tonight, is it working on its own, or is it just stagnant and is it not compounding? So it's kind of a lot to unpack, David. What are your thoughts on kind of what I just rolled out?
It's really good. I'm glad you categorize, these kind of 4 particular areas that a lot of people find themselves in. If I start from the bottom up, we find a lot of W-2 income earners in particular that find themselves saving up 200,000. Quite frankly, I've had a lot of people call me and they've saved up $1.8 million. And it might be in money markets. It might be in their bank account. It's super liquid, but they don't trust anything. They don't trust their financial advisor. They read the news every day. And so they think it's a bad time to invest. You know, the stock market is clearly in a bubble. They read the Financial Times every day, and they think the US dollar is, you know, imminently going to fall apart because of, you know, government borrowing. They think that real estate is overpriced and interest rates are high, and so they don't like real estate. And so the do nothing option, the save option, seems like the most prudent option. I know there are millions and millions of people like that out there. And so if you're in that bucket, I would say listen closely for the next 30 minutes, because that bucket is where there are so many people in. If you're in the bucket prior to that, where you're just earning and spending, I'd suggest that you at least get into the saving bucket, right? But let's move on. So you had that, you know, high income earner, not investing whatsoever. But they're very, very liquid, so they feel good about that. And it feels emotionally, by the way, I've had hundreds of conversations with this avatar, right? This person. And they have their money in the bank. They know it's gnawing away at them in the background that they should be doing something, but they just can't trust anything, and they can't get over the emotional requirements to put their money into illiquidity, which is exactly your point. And so in our case, a lot of people come to us to discuss real estate, and they usually do so after the emotional turmoil of saving and watching their savings essentially erode away with inflation over years. Many times it's years. It's not months or weeks. It's years. And so they come to us and say, look, I realize now I need to do something. And so they're looking at real estate. And you mentioned a great point, the illiquidity of real estate. So you buy a piece of real estate and it's quite illiquid. And so once you buy it, it's kind of out of sight. Well, I wish it was out of mind, but it ties you in. It locks you down. It puts a wall around you and say, look, your emotions may swing this way or that way, but real estate is a great way of combating your personal emotions, because you put your money in, and if you think the market is going up, that's great. If you think the market's going down, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to sell it, to get your tenant out, or to do this or to do that. And then the barriers to exit are there essentially. And most people won't really fully embrace the HELOC or the equity out thing till a little bit later on. But real estate is a great way of, getting from, that high savings liquid bucket to the at least invested and compounded space that over time, and we will conclude in this a little bit later, over time, real estate is a great way of staying invested, sometimes multi-generationally. So staying invested for all of my life, staying invested for my spouse's wife, our life, and my kids' lives, hopefully. And so real estate can be often multi-generational in its nature, and whilst also throwing off income. And you were talking about that's the income that you can feel actually quite good about spending. If you have income that's residual, it comes in, month out, but you didn't work for it, essentially, right? It's a little easier to go buy yourself a steak dinner with $1,400 you got from a tenant. If you're getting $1,400 from that tenant again in a few days or 30 days from now, it's a little easier to go to that restaurant and buy that steak, rather than if you went out and you worked for 30 days and with your money and your savings, you're going to feel a little bit more anxious about buying that steak dinner when you worked for it. And then you mentioned, which is a real important topic, is you can invest in businesses. And this is fantastic. I'm really glad that you did, because they really fall into a number of buckets as well. Is businesses can act very similarly to real estate, in that businesses are difficult to run. Sometimes businesses kind of fall into two categories. So businesses can give you great income, and it can be a great source of net worth, right? So this gets into the topic of the inverse relationship. If you are running a business, let's say, that throws off, $1 million of EBITDA earnings every year, so you're taking home $1 million, let's say, you're going to feel pretty wealthy, right? So long as your business, can keep on doing what it's doing, and in the back of your mind, so long as the business isn't killing you, right? That you're not there in the middle of the night, every night, that you're actually able to take vacations, that you're actually able to enjoy your kid's life or a weekend away without constantly having to be anxious about your phone, right? And all of that kind of stuff. A business can be a great way of throwing off income, but on the wealth side, you have got to be able to build a business that is sellable, because, if you can sell your business for 4 or 5 times EBITDA, you've got $1 million of EBITDA every year, let's say. EBITDA being what a owner takes home, to summarize it just briefly. If you can take home $1 million a year, well, then you could technically sell your business for 5 million, but your business has got to be a business that can be sold, right? And so this is an emotional thing. This is what we're talking about, that you could have a person here earning $1 million a year, but they kind of know in their heart 2 things. One, that there's a competitor just after opening up a monster business next door that's eating away and gnawing away at their bottom line. That could be happening. But they also kind of know that they can't really sell it, because the business is all wrapped around them.
Yeah.
It's about them. Or the business could be completely about one client. We've got one major client, and if something would happen to that client, then we got no business. That's not a sellable business. Or if the business is kind of wrapped around, let's say, me or you as an individual, it's Clark's photography, and or you're a musician. Let's just say you're a musician, and you've got, you're the business, right? Just use that as a silly example. But if the business is around you, you can't sell it. If you've got one client, you can't sell it. But if you've built a business that it, can take in $1 million of take home profits for an owner, and the owner can walk away, and the business can still make money without them, so the business is sellable, well, then that's almost like that's the sweet spot we're talking about. So in these categories today, as we kind of get into what the essence here is these are the categories that we want to draw. Where's the sweet spot in all of this? Because there's a lot of business owners, particularly Clark, I know, they might make $1 million worth of EBITDA, right? It sounds amazing. Made $1 million last year, right? But guess what? Then the tax man wants to take 30% of that. So now, but he's reinvested it all in the business. It's like you might have made $1 million worth of profit, but you don't have $1 million sitting in your bank account. You never do. You bought a new truck. You brought on 5 new employees. You brought in a new machine. You brought in a new marketing campaign. And so I know a huge amount of business people. This is in our world, by the way, in the lending world, where business people come in, they say, I've got a tax bill, $300, but I don't have it. It's all wrapped up in the business. And so then they have to go scrambling for loans. And sometimes they can't get those loans. And so they come to lenders and they say, listen, I've got a $300,000 tax bill, and I've got some equity in a commercial building. I've got some equity in some real estate I own. So just because you have $1 million of quote unquote profit from your business does not mean that you have $1 million in your bank account. Again, can create anxiety, right? So, when you hear of people earning a lot of money, you probably don't know what is really going on in terms of their financial anxiety. But as we look as real estate investors in our world over the decades, I do know a lot of folks who seem quite happy with themselves. They seem to have the net worth thing worked out, and they seem to have the income thing worked out. Clark, do you want to give me some examples of that and what we're alluding to here?
Yeah, I like the example of the machine. Let's say the machine is $50,000 for the XYZ business, and you have a choice to make as an owner, as someone that has the ability to point the fire hose, right? You can point it to the new boat, you can point it to the upgraded bathroom in your house, you can point it to the new vacation, or you can point it to the machine in the business or real estate or anything else we're talking about, right? And that mentality, which is what we're really talking about today, is you buy the machine, right? But can that machine produce X amount more inventory that then you can grow and you can add another employee to help manufacture that, which means you need to go and sell that, which means instead of being able to sell 2 widgets for the week, you can sell 3. Does that mean that you can sell 50% more with that one $50,000 machine? Just think about that. How much can you grow your inventory to be able to sell that by 20% more, 30% more? And then let's say you can grow it to 20% more. Now going into your EBITDA, right, which is going to basically give you how much money after all expenses are paid before debt, essentially. So if you own a business free and clear and you make $1 million, you may have $5 million of top line revenue. You have 20%, which means that you take home your $1 million before you pay a bank back for any of that, right? And then you have the ability to point the fire hose and say, yeah, but can we make $7.5 million in revenue instead of 5 with this machine? And then you have a multiplier on that. So then you grow your EBITDA earnings, right? And then you have a multiplier of 3 or 4x. You're looking back at that, and it started with that $50,000 piece of machinery. That is so incredibly powerful. And that is what we were talking about today. And I want to give you an example, David, of I'm going to revert back to what I said earlier about like, hey, when I was in the W-2, I had no financial anxiety, right? But there was nothing compounding, right? Now I have all this quote unquote financial anxiety, but now I get to know what I know, right? So it's like, you always hear on a lot of podcasts, oh, what would you tell to yourself your 22-year-old self? What would you tell to yourself? Well, now I know what I know, right? So now my financial anxiety personally is the minute that I have more than 20 or 30 grand sitting in an account, my anxiety is that it's still sitting in that account the next day and the next day, because I know that it needs to be put on the street in some sort of compounding fashion, whether it's buying a piece of machinery if you own a business, whether it's buying training to be able to go out on your own, whether it's buying another piece of real estate kind of in our business, right? My anxiety, David, lies with having money sitting in a bank account, which is the antithesis of the rainy day fund, right? So it's like, I want my rainy day fund to be so small because I know that money is not working for me, because I've seen what happens when my money does work for me over the last 10 or 15 years. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot have it sitting there, right? And it does 2 things, right? It compounds for me in whatever investment I put it in. Now, the risk, right? The investment may go bad, it may go up, it may go down. I do know in real estate that over time it will self-correct. So I could buy the worst investment, and I know that if I own it 5, 6, 7 years, eventually it will right its way, and it will become a good investment. Maybe not as good, but it still won't hurt me. But the second thing, and to me is most important, is it leaves me always with my back against the wall, which always makes me feel broke, which always means that when your back is against the wall, it's burn your boats, right? You either die or you going in to win the fight every single time, and there's no comfort. I'm not comfortable. I'm uncomfortable as hell, and I've got to go out every day and put my boxing gloves on and bust through doors, because I know that if I don't, I've got all these slight quote unquote illiquid investments that are not easy to pull money out of, and I've got to figure it out as quickly as possible. So there's the mental thing, right? Of just knowing that my back's against the wall and I better fight my way out of it every day and not get comfortable and get sucker punched. And also too, is that I know that having money, rainy day funds just sitting around is bad for business. It doesn't compound. And my 40-year-old brain that's gone through 10, 15, 20 years now of saving, buying real estate, making bad investments, making good investments, I'm packing all that knowledge in. And I know that statistically, anything that I put my money into is going to start compounding on itself and working harder. It works when I sleep. So my financial anxiety right now, David, is that if I have more than 20 or 25 grand sitting in a savings account somewhere, I'm nervous as hell.
Well, I'd like to summarize, my feelings on it, because I've been each one of these people. When I didn't know much about money and I was working my butt off for it, okay, this is starting out, I saved my hind legs off. I was a saver,
Of course.
Naturally. I was never at the steak restaurant. So I'm eating, I'm eating healthy, but I'm not at the steak restaurant. Never was. It just, it was not in my nature. I was a saver, but then I had to learn to move from being a saver, because I'm not talking about some other person here. I'm talking about me. I had to learn to move away from being a saver, playing it safe. And I realized that the kind of risk was not in doing things. I realized that the risk was not doing things. Okay.
That's good.
It wasn't in doing things. It was not doing things. And so I moved away from being like a really harmful saver. Like I saved and saved, and I thought I was doing the right thing. And then I moved into business and real estate kind of at the same time, right? I've owned lots of businesses. And so businesses are hard, man. Businesses are tough. Anyone out there telling you to business, running a business, growing a business, it is all consuming from morning till night, and you can be killing it, but there's people involved, there's capital involved, there's taxes involved, there's accounts involved, there's machinery involved, there's entropy involved, there's competitors, there's evolving markets. Like, running a business is a really hard thing to do. That's why I do really, really like these like home services business, like garage door companies. By and large, you can, get your template going and move on. But businesses are subject to very high levels of entropy. A huge amount of businesses don't make it beyond 5 years. And then, less so make it beyond 10 years. And so even if you look at the S&P 500, it's not personal. But if you look at the S&P 500 today and look at the S&P 500 20 years ago, there are very few companies. And these are the best run companies in the United States that are still there. There are a few, don't get me wrong, but there are very few companies that make it through decades. They're exceptionally rare. And so the point I'm trying to make is that businesses you can make a lot of money owning a business. But the ambition of most business owners is to sell the business and get out with money, right? They get out with a payday, right? And if so the business owner breaks up into two categories. There's the business owner who is building his business or her business to exit with a high level of net worth. And there's the business owner who has a high level of income, but knows he can't exit. If you're one of those two characters and you are a business owner, you're listening to this, you can probably identify with one or the other. So let's break down the business owner. Almost all business owners, Clark, these days, there's no Clark, Lunt and Son anymore. Your kids don't want your business more often than not. And there are millions of baby boomers right now that own businesses, getting ready to exit. Some of them will be able to sell their businesses. Let's say they walk away with $6 million or $10 million. They will have, the day that they sell their business, they will start to suffer from what you just talked about. They have $10 million in a bank account,
Yeah.
but they're not equipped to do anything with it. They're just That's honestly, I've spoken to a lot of people. They're like, David, I've got all this money. I sold my business. I need to get it working for me. Right. That's anxiety. Like literally it's their anxiety because they don't have any income left. Right. We have friends who work in professional sports and they end their careers in professional sports. They've gone from high income to no income overnight and they're freaked out, albeit that they have a lot of money. And so I want to highlight that the business owner who does exit, he might exit with a lot of wealth. He's walking away from his income, or the business owner who has a lot of income but can't exit, and he knows it, but he's getting tired. He wants to, so he wants to wind it down. In many cases, he won't have that. He won't have the net worth because he can't sell his business, right? Then you have the W-2 income earner. So I'm going to skip over real estate and go back to the W-2 income earner. That person, I hope to goodness that person has been investing in something. And they might have their 401k, they might have this, but they're just going to learn that by playing it safe their whole lives, unfortunately, they might not be able to have the lifestyle that they maybe dreamed of, the ability to travel the world or do this or do that. But to me, and this is my conclusion, there actually is a sweet spot. And the sweet spot for me, and I only say that because I've owned a business, a very, very high income business that I couldn't sell because most of the business was in and around me or my efforts, or that the business was had a low moat, was fairly easy to enter, and the business itself wasn't systemized where I could walk away indefinitely and the business would continue to run, or that I had too much industry knowledge. And so if I stepped out and my industry knowledge was to be taken away from the decision making, that I wouldn't have been able to sell the business. So I've owned a high income business that I couldn't sell. So guess what? I had loads of income, Clark, racked with financial anxiety, right?
What?
And then, as I say, you've got the guys who've got loads of money and they're racked with financial anxiety. You got the W-2 income earner and they're savers and they're racked with financial anxiety. And then you got the, obviously we got the, the 20-year-old, on 200 grand a year, $300,000 a year, living his best life or her best life. But we promised that we would conclude with what we thought was a happy spot, right? And it's more, the conclusion is more empirical than anything else. It's more just like, I just happen to be in the business and I happen to, invest in real estate. And when you invest in real estate, you're taking the high income that you talked about that was making you nervous in your bank account. You're taking that from a state of liquidity and you're putting it into illiquidity, where my emotions, and I'm very emotional, but my emotions weren't like, it stopped me from being emotional. So it kept me in the market through thick and thin. When COVID hit, or when 2008 hit, or whenever else, name your black swan event, I didn't react and then I have bonus depreciation taken on all of these properties as well, and other depreciation. So if I sell them, I'd end up paying a bunch of taxes, closing costs, bonus depreciation, clawback. And so it kept me in the market. And so I find myself, having been an investor in real estate for a long time, that as time goes on, most of my mortgages are kind of paid off, or they're certainly close to it. And so I find myself in a comfortable position in that there's decent net worth just in equity. But there is also, as time goes on, rents go up and inflation kicks in, there's quite a lot of income too. And so I think that that's the essence to financial stability or financial security, is that where you have your net worth thing, it's there, you have equity, you have access to high net worth, but that high net worth is working for you. But then you also have residual income that comes in every month that you're not working for, right? So that your short-term brain, right, your right now brain is like, no, I can go to the steak restaurant because Mrs. Jones, who rents 123 Main Street, just gave me 35% of her paycheck this week. And she's going to give it to me again next week. And I don't really have all that much, overhead on that property. And so that's the money you can genuinely spend with abandon. I don't earn it really. There's going to be more of it next month. And yet I'm not spending my net worth. I'm not spending my nest egg. I'm not spending my overall value. Right. And so I think that in hindsight, that is where I think all humans in the conversations that I've had find themselves most comfortable, where they have nice residual income whilst also having reasonable, you talked about not having any money in the bank. I think you need a certain amount of liquidity certainly in real estate, in your business account to cover for roofs and ACs and repairs and stuff, so that they're not emotional decisions. But also you're also invested, and those investments are harnessing inflation, amortization, and because the growth is always there, you can continue to grow that pretty organically. And so for me, as we talked about this difficulty between high net worth and high income, and both feeling anxious, I feel that real estate is a middle ground. And I think that that's why so many people gravitate towards real estate. It's like, as a 60-year-old, I don't really want to buy business. I really don't, because I know it's going to take my time. And so what's your thoughts? So we went from business owners, and they're two different categories of, one with an exit strategy and one without, one with a lot of money and one with a lot of high income, but right down to those W-2 income earners with a lot of money in their account, to real estate. And I feel privileged that we have found ourselves in real estate, because I think real estate is that perfect balance. What do you think of that, Clark?
Yeah, I mean, actions speak louder than words, right? So real estate to me is a no-brainer because it's more passive. I watched my parents, they owned a very successful home improvement company, but they put their blood, sweat, and tears into that business every single day. Every single day, they put everything on the line for that company, for the employees, to make sure that they were treated well, that they were paid well, and it changed their life. But they literally, I mean, it was a fairly stressful time. So I saw that, and I was a witness to it, and I worked for them. I want you listening to this right now I think it's important for you to understand. It's like the alcoholic that doesn't know he's the alcoholic. So the first step one is like saying, I'm an alcoholic, right? Then you go to the AA meeting and you try and better yourself, right? So I kind of want you listening to it right now, whether you're running down the road, whether you're driving, whether you're cooking dinner, is to understand where you fall in these different buckets, right? And I think a few questions to be able to kind of sniff that out is, number one, if you got fired from your job tomorrow, how would your life be impacted, right? I know how my life would be impacted if my just active income went to zero. And because of the fact that I've been constantly reinvesting into things that are compounding, now it's enabled me to get enough income to where, yes, I'm not flying to the Bahamas every weekend, but I'm not freaking out, right? So if you're sitting here listening and you got fired, you got let go, your industry went away, AI took your job, and you no longer have an income, how impacted are you? Are you just staring at a savings account that's just going to slowly go down to zero? And then the second thing is that your excess money that's not for bills, for kids, for daycare, for the car expense, for the mortgage expense, how is that money, how liquid is it? Is it sitting in a savings account? Is it sitting in a real estate property? Is it sitting in crypto? Is it saving up to buy a business? Is it investing back into yourself to be able to go through training or seminars to be able to start that business? The more liquid your cash is, the less it's really working for you. And you might want to think about something different. So with that being said, I think those are things that you need to ask yourself. We hope that you've enjoyed kind of this. This is a bit of a higher level episode, more on mindset, I would say. But in all reality, David, we've had episodes where we've done mindset, and then we've kind of had episodes where we kind of dig into the nuts and bolts. the nuts and bolts are great, and I love talking about it. And sometimes it's sexier topics to talk about, but in all reality, the nuts and bolts only come from the mindset starting, and you have to be able to get your mindset right. And by thinking about some of the things that we're talking about, being able to understand where you fall on the spectrum of the saver all the way to the business owner and everything in between, how liquid are your assets or how illiquid are your assets, being able to understand where you fit into it, and then maybe where you can grow to or start to make some changes, maybe even quote unquote burn your boats in certain instances, I think will help you to get to that point faster, just knowing where you're at today listening to this podcast.
That's very good. And if you are a business owner with an exit strategy, congratulations. And, don't be afraid to take that and a good chunk of that and put it into assets that throw off income. Don't be afraid of the market, if you will. If you are a business owner and you are currently earning high income and but kind of in your heart of hearts that you've got a business that's kind of wrapped around you, or that you might not really have that big exit strategy, you could work towards that by all means. But I would implore you to take, most of your income that you can get your hands on and invest in real estate that is going to compound and throw off capital for you later on. And if you're further down the food chain and you are a W-2 income earner or you're a small business or owner, definitely, to Clark's point, upskill yourself. Think about taking some of that money and going and doing some good courses. Think about taking that money and buying your first piece of real estate. Think about taking that money and buying a business so that you can throw off higher income so you can buy real estate. Because we mentioned in podcast episode number 1, I believe it was, or number 2, we were talking about stepping stones from income island to wealth island. And the bottom line is, you can earn all the money in the world. But you can often feel financial anxiety. So that's what we're trying to get across. And Wealth Island is when you are spending other people's money that they give to you monthly or weekly or quarterly, and your wealth is growing while you're in the Bahamas or on a boat down the Danube and money's hitting your account. That's Wealth Island. Wealth Island is when money is coming into your bank account every single month, if you like it or not, and it's going to come in perpetuity. And it doesn't require you to be involved or to make emotional decisions or to be emotional about money in general. And so Wealth Island is where we want everybody in this podcast to get to. Business owners, don't get me wrong, there's the breakout guys and girls who are, the breakout folks who get into their hundreds of millions. They're wealthy. That's fine. But, this podcast is always going to be about the man on the street. Okay. And that's what we're talking to. We're talking to that small and medium-sized business owner. We're talking to that W-2 income earner. What we are saying, and in conclusion, what we are saying is real estate, consistently purchasing real estate over a long period of time, dollar cost averaging into real estate with that extra income in a beta every year, if you're a business owner, or if you do manage to get an early exit in a business, I would implore you, buy real estate. Or if you are starting out as a W-2 earner, start buying real estate, because real estate has, for us, liberated us from income island onto what I would consider, or what we describe as wealth island. It doesn't mean that we're wealthy. What it means is that we have nice residual income that pays our expenses every month, and we are always growing our net worth through compounding and inflation. And with that being said, we don't suffer anxieties that maybe a business owner makes $1 million a year working his tail off. Knock your socks out. But owning a real estate portfolio, you don't. You work for 3-4 hours a week. Would you agree with that, Clark?
Oh, 100%. So with that, David, let's wrap this up. We'd love to hear from you guys, feedback on all the social medias at Burn Your Boats Wealth. If you fall in one of those buckets and the way we described it, you're like, that's not the life I'm living. I'd love to hear as to why we're wrong or why you feel differently. We are very much implore and recommend that you bring your thoughts about what we're talking about, because it could potentially bring new ideas for topics for episodes. because we want to talk about things that impact you listening to this right now. And personal experiences are always better than just we forecast this. So at Burn Your Boats Wealth, go hit the subscribe button, Spotify, Apple, all the different platforms. We appreciate the support. We appreciate all the people coming to us and telling them how it's starting to change the way they view things. And that to us is the most important thing. So with that, we will see you next time. Signing off. Thank you, guys.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.